My daughter expressed her disgust for me. Those were her precise words, which I heard for myself. She had recorded a voice note intended for someone else, perhaps her husband or a close friend, but through a simple mistake, it was sent to me. That error was all it took. In that single moment, something inside me withered and died. Every hope I had carefully preserved for years crumbled into nothingness. And it was then that I did something no one could have predicted. I put the house up for sale. The very home I had poured my sweat and effort into building, a property valued at well over $800,000. I sold it all, placed a note on the dining table, and simply vanished. My name is Arthur, and I am 76 years old. If you stay with my story until its conclusion, you might grasp why a father like me was pushed to such an extreme. I have never been a perfect man, not by a long shot, but the one thing I consistently strove to be was present. Despite being disregarded, belittled, and made to feel like a nuisance, I always remained. But that audio file was the ultimate insult, a final blow to a man who only wished to grow old with some measure of dignity. The first time I truly sensed my daughter's animosity was on a Sunday afternoon. She had stopped by, not to visit me, but to collect some of her mother's valuable china, she had claimed, a frequent excuse for her brief appearances. She barely stepped inside before complaining about the house's scent, declaring the smell of old age was suffocating. I offered a faint smile and feigned ignorance, suggesting it was just from the house being closed up, but the comment stung deeply. Like so many fathers, I pushed the hurt down, telling myself she was just stressed or tired. We are always making excuses for our children. Her name is Clara, my only child from a 30-year marriage to the great love of my life, Eleanor. She was taken from me too soon by a sudden aneurysm that left a cavernous void in our home and in my spirit. At the funeral, Clara shed no tears. She merely stated, "Well, at least now you can downsize," and then she departed. She was 28 at the time, and I have never forgotten her words. Over the years, I tried to bridge the gap. I invited her for meals, for holidays, for special occasions. She would either invent a reason not to come or show up with a sullen expression, glued to her phone. She never offered a genuine embrace or asked if I needed help. When she did inquire, it was only to make me feel small. "Need any cash, Dad?" she'd ask, as if I were a charity case. Still, I persisted. I would buy groceries with her in mind and carefully saved her childhood possessions, furniture, and mementos, hoping that one day she might value them. Deep down, I clung to the belief that the little girl I once knew was still in there somewhere. The one who would wait for me by the gate when I came home from my job, who would climb onto my lap for a story, who would cry whenever I had to leave. Where had that Claire gone? That Monday morning, when I awoke to a notification on my phone, I assumed it was a mistake. It was a voice message, 2 minutes and 22 seconds long. When I pressed play, I didn't immediately recognize the voice. It was rapid and laced with anger, the sound of someone venting to a confidant. Then came the sentence, "I'm disgusted by that old man. Seriously, he makes me sick. Just the thought that one day I'll be responsible for him makes me want to run away." My heart seized. I took a breath and listened a second time. There was no doubt. It was my daughter's voice, speaking about me with revulsion, as if I were nothing more than dead weight in her life. I rose from the bed and sat on its edge, staring at the floor for what felt like hours. It's strange, but I didn't cry. I think I had no tears left for her. I simply stood up, went to my closet, and retrieved my important documents. I found a deed to the house, dressed myself, and walked to the real estate agency. "I want to sell below the market price," I told the agent. "I need to sell it quickly. I need to disappear. I want to vanish from the life of someone who is disgusted by me." The sale was finalized in 2 days. A young couple from out of state saw the house and immediately fell in love with it. They didn't even try to negotiate, saying they were looking for a quieter life. When they asked why I was selling, I simply replied, "It's time for a new beginning." That evening, with a steady and emotionless hand, I wrote a note. It said, "The disgusting old man has gone to live his life. You're on your own now. Goodbye." I placed it on the living room table with the house key beside it. In a single day, I packed everything that was mine, My clothes, my papers, a photograph of Eleanor, my wallet, and a cherished watch she had given me for our last anniversary. The next morning, I went to the airport and purchased a one-way ticket to a distant place where no one knew my name. It was a place where I could walk the streets without feeling a sense of shame, without waiting for a phone call that would never come. A place where I could live out the remainder of my days in peace. Clara only noticed my absence 3 days later when she came by to pick up an old dollhouse she had forgotten. She knocked, called, and got no answer. When she let herself in, she found the empty rooms, the note on the table, the key, and the resounding echo of her own voice in the house where she was raised. I was told she frantically called relatives, feigning worry. But it wasn't concern she felt. It was fear. Only then did she begin to comprehend what she had lost. Only then did she grasp that the old man she found so disgusting was the one who had held her world together. But by then I was far away, my passport stamped, my soul feeling light for the first time in years. I no longer needed to plead for love from someone who had never offered me even a shred of respect. And that, my friend, is a taste of freedom that is impossible to describe. It was in this new place, far from my past, that something unexpected began to unfold. On the airplane, I remained silent, gazing out the window at the clouds as if the entire world was being reset. I no longer had a home, a family, or a past, just a ticket, a note in my pocket, and a small bag with my essentials. Yet, I didn't feel empty. For the first time, I felt a sense of liberation. The ache was still there, but it was a pain that no longer had control over me. I chose a warm state with simple people, a place where I could get by. With the money from the house, I opened a new, untraceable bank account. It was a rebirth of sorts. After a lifetime of trying to be a good father, it was time to prove I was still a complete man. I rented a modest cottage in a peaceful town. On my first day, I walked to the local grocer and bought bread, milk, fruit, and a couple of bottles of wine. I sat on my porch, observing the quiet rhythm of the neighborhood. Children played in the street, an elderly man swept his walkway, and a neighbor hung laundry on a line. No one knew me, and in that anonymity, I found a tranquility I hadn't experienced in decades. But at night, when silence descended, memories would surface. Loneliness is something you carry with you, no matter where you go. That evening, alone with a bowl of soup, I looked at a bare wall and was transported back in time. I remembered when Clara first fell ill as a small child, around 4 years old. She had a raging fever that wouldn't break. Eleanor and I stayed awake for 3 straight days. My wife sat by her bed, dabbing her forehead with a cool cloth, while I sat by the door, car keys in hand, ready to rush to the hospital. When the fever finally subsided, she woke up, looked at me with her little, raspy voice, and asked, "Daddy, were you here the whole time?" I told her I was sweetheart. I'll stay forever. The memory tore through me because I had kept my promise. I stayed through every phase. Her adolescent identity crisis, the time she ran away after a trivial argument, when she wanted to quit university, and through her first heartbreak. I stayed when she needed a co-signer for her car, when she wrecked it, and when she lost her job. I stayed even when her cold words pushed me away. And now, she was disgusted by me. That night, I opened a bottle of wine and raised a glass to the sky, toasting my own courage in silence. It isn't easy to leave everything behind, to admit that you've lost your child while they are still living, that the love you gave will never be returned. But it is also unbearable to live a life begging for affection. I was tired of being the old man waiting for a call on Sunday, pretending not to hear the insults, giving birthday gifts only to receive a curt thank you. I refused to let my life end that way. In the days that followed, I started exploring the town. We often believe we are too old for a new beginning, but everyone deserves a second chance. I joined the community library and met a group of gentlemen who gathered in the square to play dominoes and talk. I bought myself a new hat and became a familiar face at the corner market. I befriended a man named Samuel who had recently lost his wife and shared the same look of longing I carried. We would talk for hours about everything except our children. I understood that some pains are only shared with those who carry their own. I never attempted to contact Clara or any other family members again. I never learned if she read the note, if she panicked, if she cried, or if she laughed. It no longer mattered. The time I had left was my own, and I wouldn't squander it trying to mend something that was only valued on one side. She could deal with her own guilt. I had carried my share for long enough. But one Saturday morning, a letter arrived. It had no return address, just a phrase on the front. I found this in your daughter's desk drawer. Inside was an old photograph of Clara and me during a picnic in the park when she was 6. It was a perfect day, one I remembered vividly. Eleanor had taken the picture. Clara was laughing with pure joy, and in that image, we were happy. We were everything I thought I would never lose. The letter contained nothing else, just the photo, the envelope, and that cryptic sentence. It was from someone in my past, someone who knew my story, who had witnessed what I had lived through and what I had lost. Someone who wanted to tell me, without words, that my life as a father had not been in vain. I placed the photograph in a simple frame on my living room shelf, not to remember the daughter I had lost, but to remember the father I had been and still was. No one, not even silence, could erase that. That afternoon, with the sound of a gentle rain tapping on the roof, I wrote in the journal I've kept since Eleanor was alive. A man's greatest strength is not in forgiving. It's in knowing when to walk away, and at that very moment there was a knock on my door. The knock was unexpected, especially on a rainy afternoon. My heart quickened, not because I thought it was Clara, but because after so much time in solitude, any human interaction felt significant. I rose, smoothed my shirt, and opened the door. A young woman with dark hair, tied back in a shy, curious expression, stood there with a backpack. She offered a small smile and asked, "Are you Mr. Arthur?" It took me a moment to respond. I rarely use my full name anymore. I nodded, and she continued, "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Sophie, the granddaughter of Mrs. Agnes, your neighbor. She mentioned you know about old radios. I have one that belonged to my grandfather, and I was hoping it could be saved." For a moment, I was still. An old radio. It was like a gust of wind from my past. For over 30 years, I had worked in electronics repair, starting with radios and televisions. I had a small workshop in the back of my old house, and I once tried to teach Clara how to use the tools when she was 12. She hated it, calling it old man stuff. I invited Sophie inside. She pulled the radio from her bag, a beautiful wooden relic with worn knobs, smelling of dust and time. As I took it, I felt a strange sensation, as if my hands had rediscovered a part of themselves they had long forgotten. "Can you fix it?" she asked. "Yes," I replied, "but it will require time and patience." She smiled, relieved, and said no one else in town knew how to handle such old things. Before she left, she gave me a sincere handshake. "Mr. Arthur, it's a pleasure to meet you, sir." I closed the door, holding the radio, and realized it had been a long time since anyone had called me sir with such respect. It had been ages since I felt useful, like I was more than just a body occupying space. I took the radio to a small table I used as a workbench, laid out my tools, put on my glasses, and began to carefully disassemble it. Each screw I removed reminded me of when Clara would run through my workshop, complaining about the mess and saying her friends' fathers were more modern. And yet, I always put everything back together. While working, I opened a small box of old papers and found a folded medical prescription of Eleanor's. On the back, in her handwriting, was a note. "I love you." Even on the difficult days, she said that often, and there were many difficult days. Raising a child on a tight budget, maintaining a marriage, and dealing with life's frustrations takes a toll. But she never gave up on me or on Clara. Even when our daughter grew distant, Eleanor would say, "One day, she will understand. Now I know that day may never come." And that's all right. I also needed to understand that you cannot beg for love, that a man's dignity lies in knowing his own worth. And I did not deserve to be called disgusting. Night fell, and the radio finally hummed to life. I turned the dial, and an old instrumental song, a gentle melody from my youth, filled the room. I closed my eyes and just listened. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. In that moment, I felt not self-pity but pride. Pride for creating something with my own hands, for still being here, for continuing on. The next day, I returned the radio to Sophie. She beamed as if I had given her a treasure and gave me a rare and welcome hug. She said her grandmother wanted to meet me. That evening, I accepted Mrs. Agnes's invitation for coffee. We sat on her porch and talked about life, time, and grandchildren. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I laughed a light, unburdened laugh. Between sips of coffee, she asked, "Do you have children?" I swallowed, looked toward the horizon, and said, "I had one, but she became lost to me, and I needed to find myself." She understood and asked no more questions, simply placing her hand on mine, a gesture of someone who knows the pain of silence. When I walked home that night, I knew my life hadn't ended. It had just begun again. But everything was about to change when I received a call from an unknown number, and a voice from the past spoke to me. The phone rang late one afternoon as I was making macaroni and cheese, a simple recipe Eleanor had taught me. The aroma took me back to our old kitchen, the one she called the heart of our home. The ringing pulled me sharply from my reverie. I looked at the screen, an unknown number with an unfamiliar area code. I hesitated, thinking of ignoring it. Who would be calling me? But curiosity got the better of me. I answered. A young, polite woman's voice said, "Is this Mr. Arthur Morales?" I took a breath. "That depends on who is asking," she chuckled lightly. "I'm sorry to startle you. My name is Julia. I'm a teacher, and I was an intern at a school where your daughter taught several years ago." My blood ran cold for a second. Claire was a teacher? She had never told me, never shared anything about her professional life. I only knew she lived in the city and was married to a man who never met my gaze. "I found your name in an old notebook of Clara's that was left behind," she continued. It was a sort of journal with stray thoughts and notes. "Your name appeared several times, and I felt you deserved to know." I sank into a chair. The macaroni and cheese was burning, but I didn't move. I just listened. She wrote some harsh things, Julia said, things that made me uncomfortable, as if she held a lot of anger toward you. But mixed in were notes from when she was little. Things like, "Today, Daddy took me to the park," or "I got a beautiful porcelain doll from Daddy." It was the best day of my life. I closed my eyes. I remember that doll. I had bought it on a whim after a long shift, spotting it in a shop window. I came home exhausted, but her smile had made it all worthwhile. And now, that memory was preserved somewhere I never knew existed. "I'm sorry if this is invasive," she went on, but I was moved. The cold woman I knew, who seemed irritated by everything, carried a much more tender past than she let on. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked softly. "Because she's vanished," Julia replied. "Her and her husband. They left town without a word. No one knows where they went. I found a notebook recently while clearing out some old boxes at the school. When I saw your name, I started searching. It took me a while, but I found an old record with this phone number. I thanked her for her call, but didn't ask for the notebook. I didn't want any more details. At that moment, I understood it was pointless to search for meaning in a place of absence. Clara's fond memories were like letters that were never mailed. They existed, but they never arrived. And even if they had, they wouldn't change the person she had become. After the call, I stood on my porch as the sun dipped behind the mountains. The last rays of light cast long shadows, and I thought about the irony of it all. My daughter wrote about me, thought about me, yet chose to push me away her entire life, as if remembering was safer than living alongside me. That evening, I opened a box of old keepsakes, my wedding ring, the watch Eleanor gave me, a tie I wore only once at Claire's christening. I touched each item, feeling the presence of my wife and the ghost of my daughter. Then I found a photograph I had forgotten. The three of us were on a park bench. Clara, about 5, was on my lap. I had a fuller beard, and Eleanor wore a floral dress, her hand resting on my back, a wide smile on her face. On the back, in her handwriting, it said, "Love lives where we return, even after the pain." It broke my heart because she had always believed in returning. She always hoped Clara would come back, always had faith in the goodness hidden within her. I tried to carry that faith, but I had failed, and that was okay. It was too late now. The audio message wasn't a mistake. It was the unvarnished truth. and her truth was disgust. I spent that night awake, wandering through my small house, tidying books, sweeping a corner. I tried to exhaust my body to quiet my mind, but it was no use. At dawn, I sat by my door with a cup of coffee and wrote another entry in my journal. I don't regret leaving. I only regret not leaving sooner. The following weeks were quiet. It was as if Clara had simply dissolved. Maybe she had. A daughter who chose forgetting as her inheritance. That month, I started teaching a radio repair class for local youth. 3 students showed up. Even with simple tools, I felt something new beginning. Not as a father, but as a man among men. One of them asked if I had grandchildren. I replied, I have memories. Some good, some bad. For now, that is what keeps me company. He smiled as if he understood. And just as I was starting to breathe freely again, another letter arrived. This time, the sender's name froze me to my core. It was from him, her husband, my former son-in-law. The envelope was plain white, but the name in the top left corner was unmistakable, written in small, neat letters. Mark. I hadn't seen or heard that name in years. My daughter's husband, the man who, from our first meeting, had treated me like an inconvenience. He was cold, controlling, with a smile just polite enough to pass for respect. I knew he never liked me, but for Clara's sake, I had held my tongue. I stared at the envelope for several minutes before opening it. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, just as Eleanor used to when I was stressed. The house was still. Only then did I open the letter, like someone carefully probing an old wound. It began with a hello, Arthur, which immediately felt false. He had never called me by my first name. It was always Clara's father. I know you must be surprised to hear from me, he wrote. I'm not sure where you are, but I hope this address would still work. I'm not writing to apologize or make excuses. I just felt you deserved to know a few things. I took a sip of tea. My hand was shaking. I continued reading. Clara is not well. Since you disappeared, she's fallen into a state I've never seen before. First, it was desperation, then anger, and now just silence. She doesn't talk. She quit her job, and she blames me for everything. She says I encouraged her to keep her distance, that I fed her aversion to you. And perhaps that's true. I lean back. Perhaps that's true. That man had systematically destroyed any chance of a relationship between a father and daughter with his poisoned, sweet-sounding words. He was the one who said the house smelled musty. He was the one who pushed Clara to decide what to do with me. I once overheard him say that the best place for an elderly person was a nursing home. I never forgot it. And now he was writing with this tone of confession. She found your note. The letter went on. She read it, and she shattered. She screamed, broke things, and said you had no right, that she just needed more time. But the truth, Arthur, is that you two had drifted so far apart. Neither of you knew how to come back. No, Mark. It wasn't both of us. It was her. She was the one who closed the door, who hung up the phone, who said with her own voice that she was disgusted by me. That can't be undone with a letter. It leaves a permanent mark. I'm writing today because I don't know what to do anymore. We're living far away now, and she told me she can only start living again if she can see her father one more time. I know it might be too late, but if there is any space left in your heart, please tell me where you are. Even if it's just so she can hear your voice. I finished the letter and folded it neatly. No tear had stained the paper, which told me everything. He wasn't writing out of compassion. He was writing out of desperation. The ground had given way beneath them, and he was grasping for a lifeline. But I had already learned to swim on my own. I took a fresh envelope and wrote my reply. Stop looking. The man you remember is gone. The one who endured in silence, who waited patiently, who tolerated contempt. He died the day he heard his own daughter say he was a despicable being. I lived too long waiting for a maybe that never came. I no longer accept that role. Go live your lives. Just don't count on me. The disgusting one is gonna live. Goodbye. I signed it not as a father, but as a man. I mailed the letter and then bought myself a strong coffee at the town square. I watched life go on around me. Children playing, a couple sharing a pastry, young people strumming a guitar. It was then I realized something profound. We spend so much of our lives trying to be accepted by our own that we forget we can be welcomed by strangers. I was invisible in my daughter's world, but here, people saw me. They knew my name. They said good morning. The letter I received wasn't a bridge. It was an emotional trap. And for the first time in my life, I didn't fall for it. I chose myself. That night, I put Mark's letter in a drawer alongside the saved audio file of Clara's voice, not to nurture the pain, but to never forget who she chose to be. Before I slept, I made one last entry in my journal. There can be no forgiveness where there was never repentance, and no new beginning without truth. The phone rang the next day, but this time, I didn't even bother to answer. The following week, silence became my companion. There were no more calls, no more letters, no more intrusions from the past. Just the sound of birds in the morning and the whistle of the kettle on the stove, heralding a new life that was finally my own. I had decided to no longer make space for memories that caused me pain. The past that had denied me love was now just dust in a forgotten corner. That Thursday, at the local market, Mr. Henderson, the owner, said to me, "Arthur, we're having a community lunch at the church hall on Saturday. Food, music, good company. Why don't you come?" I hesitated. Large gatherings still made me uneasy. But the kindness in his voice, the simple way he placed a hand on my shoulder, reminded me of a time when neighbors were like family. I smiled and promised I would consider it. On Saturday, I woke to a bright sun calling me out into the day. I showered, put on a favorite light blue shirt that Eleanor used to say made me look younger, and walked to the church. The patio was bustling with activity. I arrived feeling shy, but someone immediately called out, "Here, Arthur, sit with us." And so I did. I stayed for hours, eating roasted meat and rice, drinking fresh cider, and listening to live accordion music. In that circle of mismatched chairs, I saw something I hadn't seen in a very long time. People looking at each other, real people with flaws and stories, but with their souls wide open. A woman named Mrs. Celia sat beside me. She had kind eyes and strong arms. "You have the look of a man who has done a lot of silent crying," she said gently. I looked at her and laughed from a place deep inside. "Silent crying is what I've done most of my life," I admitted. "Well," she replied, "you don't have to anymore. Here, if you want to cry, we'll bring you a handkerchief. If you want to laugh, we'll bring you coffee. And if you just want to be quiet, we'll sit beside you and be quiet too." Her words disarmed me. After being told for so long that I was a burden, a nuisance, an obstacle, someone was telling me I could simply exist as I was. It was priceless. At the end of the lunch, they asked me to tell a story. I was known as the radio man, the one who could fix old things. I took the makeshift microphone and told them about my very first repair, a 1960s radio I brought back to life with a piece of wire, a nail, and a lit candle. The crowd laughed and applauded, and for a moment, I felt truly alive again. Walking home, I paused at my gate and thought, how is it possible to find more warmth with strangers than with your own blood? How can a man who dedicated his life to his daughter end up needing strangers to remember his worth? Inside, I wrote in my journal, "The family that didn't want me taught me to value those who offer a hand without asking for my last name." Life continued in this new, calm rhythm. I felt useful again, not as a father, but as a man with a past and a present. One day at the library, I found a donated, tattered copy of Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. Rereading the story of the old fisherman alone against the currents, I saw myself. A man who bleeds, who loses, but who endures. I kept the book. That evening, I looked at the old photograph of Clara still on my shelf. I took it out of the frame, placed it inside a folder, and put in its place a picture from the church lunch of me smiling alongside my new friends. People who reminded me I was not born to be someone's leftover. The past could stay where it belonged. I had a life to live. And just when I thought there were no more surprises, a young woman appeared at my door with an envelope in her hands and a secret inside it. She stood at my gate, holding the envelope as if it were something precious and fragile. She looked to be in her 20s, with her hair in a simple ponytail. My first thought was that she was a social worker, but before I could ask, she spoke. "Are you Mr. Arthur Morales?" That name, spoken by a stranger, no longer stung. I simply nodded. "My name is Isabel," she said, offering a hesitant smile. I think I found something that belongs to you. I looked from her face to the envelope, intrigued by the care in her expression. I invited her to sit on the porch, and she handed it to me. I work for a charity that collects items from houses that are being sold, she explained. We try to reuse and donate things. We received a donation from a house in San Carlos that was sold in a hurry after the owner vanished. In a drawer of an old desk, I found this envelope addressed to you. In a woman's handwriting, my hands trembled slightly. The envelope was faded yellow, the paper thick and old. On the back was a script I knew as well as my own. Eleanor. My heart pounded like it did when I was a young man, waiting for her outside the school. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper, filled with her soft, slanted handwriting. My love, it began. I'm writing this on an ordinary day, but my heart feels heavy, as if time is slipping away. I know you've been tired, and life has been hard. Clara has grown up, and sometimes it feels like we've lost that sweet girl. But I wanted to remind you that everything we planted is still here, inside of me and inside of you. If one day I'm gone, and I say this not for drama, but for truth, I want you to remember one thing. You are a good man. Even when they doubt you, even when she doubts you, Clara will pull away. I feel it, but it is not your fault or mine. She will try to protect herself from pain by being cold. But do not hold on to anger. One day, perhaps she'll return, or perhaps not. But even if she doesn't, know that you did everything you could. Be strong. Be yourself. Don't let anyone erase who you are. With love, Eleanor. The words swam before my eyes. Lydia had known. She had always known, long before I did. She had foreseen the distance, but even so, she had tried to shield me, to give me solid ground to stand on. Isabel sat in respectful silence. When I finished, I folded the letter, went inside, and placed it in the drawer with my most important things, like a precious gem in a safe. I returned and asked her where, exactly, she had found it. She described my old house perfectly, the scattered papers, the absence of photos on the walls. The drawer was in Eleanor's desk, a desk Clara had never once opened. My daughter had discarded the house without a second glance, and, in the end, it was a stranger who found a most valuable thing inside. Isabel smiled gently. Sometimes it's the outsiders who pick up the pieces the family lets fall in that moment. I knew she understood. I made us coffee, and we talked for an hour. Before she left, she gave me a card for her charity. If you ever want to donate stories, she said, we accept those too. I laughed and promised to consider it. As she walked away, I stood on the porch, watching the sunset. I understood that Eleanor's letter had arrived at the perfect time, not as a call to go back, but as a final validation. As if she were saying, you did the right thing. You were brave for the first time in a very long time. I wrote in my journal without a trace of pain. Sometimes, the love we've stored away returns not to reconnect, but to console. And that is enough. I slept that night with the window open, my chest light, finally at peace. But that peace was not to last. A few days later, word reached the village that Clara had returned to the country and was asking for me. The news arrived the way it does in small towns, in a hushed voice over a cup of coffee. The postmistress told me, Mr. Arthur, I heard a young woman is looking for you. They say she came from New York. Tall, thin, with a sharp way of speaking, my heart didn't race. There was no more room for shock, only a profound internal silence. I thanked her for the information and walked home slowly. I knew this day would come, not with hugs and apologies, but with pride, desperation, and perhaps curiosity, but not with love. I closed my front door and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. This house was my sanctuary now, my refuge, and no one, not even my daughter, was going to take that away from me. I made strong coffee, and, while it brewed, I wrote a letter. It was not for her. It was for me. Clara, I wrote, you've come back, or you're trying to, but before you find me, I need you to know there is nothing left here for you. No resentment, no fit, only silence. You had every chance, and you wasted them all. You call me disgusting. You reduced me to a burden. Now you want to return? For what? To see if I'm still standing? I am. To see if I'm still your father? I am not. I'm a whole man who has rebuilt his soul with dignity. I only regret that you never learned how to love the one who loved you until it hurt. Goodbye. I folded the paper and tucked it inside my copy of The Old Man and the Sea. In the following days, I went about my life. I played dominoes with Samuel, helped Isabel at the library, and felt more certain than ever that I was in the right place. On Wednesday, a black car drove slowly past my house. I recognized the model. It was the same one Clara used to drive. I didn't move. I stayed on my sofa, writing. The next morning, I found Isabel leaning against my wall, looking worried. "Mr. Arthur," she said. A woman came to the charity. She said she was your daughter. She asked where you were. She seemed angry, hurried, as if it wasn't about love, but about control. I nodded. "Thank you, Isabel. You protected me. I did it out of respect," she replied. "Some people, you don't hand over, not even for family." She gave me a restored book, To Kill a Mockingbird, with a dedication to the gentleman who learned to be enough. That night, I went to bed early. I dreamt of a calm, infinite sea, and when I woke, I knew Clara was in town, and she would not leave without finding me. But I had already decided. If she came, I would not open the door. The doorbell rang at 8:40 in the morning. I was already awake, sitting in my armchair with my book and a warm mug of coffee. I knew it would be today. The bell rang a second time, then a third, but I remained still. The door was locked. I could see her shadow on the porch floor. It was Clara, not the little girl who used to scream my name, but the cold, bitter woman who had told me I disgusted her. The word no longer hurt. It was just a scar, a reminder of a boundary I would never again allow to be crossed. She knocked, first softly, then impatiently. "Dad?" "It's me." I was silent. She expected me to run to her, as I always had. "Dad, open the door." "I know you're in there." Silence. "I just want to talk. I didn't come to ask for anything. I just want to see you." Her voice cracked, but it sounded forced, like someone trying to perform emotion. I knew that act well. "Dad, I saw your note. I kept it. I read it 1,000 times. I was angry that day, Dad. I said stupid things. I don't even remember what I said, a lie." She remembered. People always remember when they vomit up the truth. "I got sick," she continued. "I'm on medication. Mark left me. Said I destroyed everything. I lost everything, Dad. I'm alone. The same loneliness she had forced upon me for years. The same isolation I had endured through silent holidays and unanswered messages. I dream about Mom," she pleaded. "She looked so sad. She said I was going to lose you forever. Dad, please, just let me in for 5 minutes, 5 minutes." It took her less than 3 minutes to destroy me in that audio message. "I'm disgusted by that old man. Seriously, he makes me sick." Those words don't vanish. I stood up, and she heard the floorboards creak. I walked to the door, pressed my palm against the wood, and spoke, not with anger, but with the calm that only comes from processed pain. "I'm not pretending anything, Clara. You're the one who spent your life pretending I wasn't your father. Now, you can harvest the silence you planted on the other side." She was stunned into muteness. "Go away, Clara. There is no place for you here anymore. I have nothing left to give you. Not even my words, Dad. I'm broken," she whispered. "You broke yourself with your own hands," I replied. "Now learn how to pick up the pieces alone. I'm your daughter." "No," I said, closing my eyes. "You're the woman who called me disgusting. Go live your life, far away from me." There was a long, necessary silence. I heard her slow steps retreat, the gate open and close, and then nothing. I returned to my chair and sipped my cold coffee. My soul, however, was warm. For the first time, I tasted freedom without guilt. It wasn't happiness, but something deeper, self-respect. The woman outside was no longer my daughter. She was just a stranger who had passed through my story and chosen her own exit. I had simply locked the door. She tried to re-enter far too late. That night, I opened my journal and wrote, "The greatest inheritance a father can leave his child is the lesson that all contempt has consequences and that dignity is never begged for. I slept with my house at peace and my heart whole." Since that day, I have not heard from Clara again. She came, she tried, she left. And that is okay. The door she was trying to open was not to a house, but to a conscience, and that had been locked from the inside long ago. I continue to live my quiet life. I walk in the mornings, I write, and I feel alive. Not as a father, but as a man who refused to disappear into abandonment, who chose to remain whole even after being shattered. People sometimes ask if I have family. I tell them, I did, but they remained in the past. I say it not with sadness, but with clarity. It is not the absence of a daughter that defines me. It is the presence of the community that now surrounds me. The people of this village, the young people at the library, the girl at the coffee shop who knows my name. That is enough. On the last page of my journal, I wrote, "Life did not give me the daughter I dreamed of, but it gave me the man I needed to become to survive without her." And that, for me, is a victory.